My husband told me I had 48 hours to leave the house I paid for, cut our daughter's health insurance knowing she has severe asthma, and filed a sworn financial statement claiming he earned $180,000 a year. What he did not know was that I used to trace hidden money for a living, and within weeks, I would uncover nearly $700,000 he moved before disclosure, an email that said move the funds before filings, and a courtroom that would strip his name off the house he thought guaranteed his power. My name is Alara Whitcomb, and this is what happened when my husband tried to take everything. Chapter 1. 48 hours. Adrian told me I had 48 hours to leave my own house. He did not raise his voice. He did not slam a door. He stood in the kitchen we had remodeled together in 2019, leaned one hand against the marble counter, and said it the way someone might announce a change in dinner plans. I have filed for divorce in Williamson County. The house is in my name. You have 2 days. For a second, I thought he was joking. We had been married since 2014. We had survived a premature birth, a mortgage, a pandemic, and years of my stepping back from my career so he could build his company. People do not end that with a deadline. Then I saw the folder in his hand, cobbled together copies of the petition, stamped by the clerk, March 12, 2024. Our daughter, Lillian, was at the dining table coloring a worksheet from school. She looked up at the word divorce the way children do when they know it is bad, but do not know how bad. You are not serious, I said. He looked almost bored. I am very serious, Alara. I reminded him that I had put down $210,000 from my inheritance when we bought this house in 2017. My aunt died in 2016 and left me $240,000. I wired $210 of it for the down payment. I still had the closing statement somewhere in the filing cabinet. He shrugged. Your name is not on the deed. Mine is. That is what matters. It felt like being pushed off a step I did not know was there. I had trusted him with the paperwork because I was on bed rest with Lillian at the time. I had signed where he told me to sign. I had believed we were building something together. Lorraine, his mother, walked in through the back door without knocking. She still had a key. She carried the kind of tight smile she wore at church potlucks. I told you this was not a stable arrangement, she said, looking at me, not him. I ignored her and asked the only question that mattered. What about Lillian? Adrian's expression changed, but not in the way I hoped. I switched our insurance as of March 1st. I'm on a solo plan now. It saves money. You did what? He lifted his chin. We need to cut costs. Your unemployment does not help. I had left my job as a certified fraud examiner in Nashville in 2018 when Lillian's asthma turned severe. Her pulmonologist at Vanderbilt told us stress could trigger attacks. We decided one parent should be fully available. Adrian had told me then that his income would carry us. Lillian needs daily medication, I said. You know that. Without insurance, it is over $1,200 a month. He looked at his watch. Then you should figure something out. The pharmacy called that afternoon while I was folding laundry upstairs. Insurance denied. The technician's voice was polite and detached. Your out-of-pocket cost today would be $1,186.24. I felt my knees weaken. I asked her to hold the prescription. I would call back. That night, Lillian coughed in her sleep. Not the dramatic, gasping kind, but the shallow, tight cough that always warned me something worse could come. I sat on the edge of her bed with the spare inhaler, counting her breaths the way I had learned to do in 2018 when her first major attack sent us to the emergency room. The ER bill in 2023 was $6,100 before insurance. I remembered because I had stared at that number for days, thinking about how thin the line was between manageable and catastrophic. I lay awake until 2 a.m, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the steady breathing of my child. I was not thinking about divorce. I was thinking about oxygen. The next morning, I started packing. Not dramatically, just practical things. Clothes for school, her favorite blanket, my laptop, the folder with her medical records. In the back of a desk drawer, I found a stack of bank statements I hadn't seen in months. I used to review our finances down to the cent when I worked in fraud investigation. After I left my job, Adrian told me not to worry about it. He handled everything. I sat on the floor and spread the statements out like evidence. His financial affidavit in the divorce filing listed his annual income as approximately $180,000 a year. That was what he'd been reporting the last 2 years. But the numbers in front of me didn't feel right. There were months where transfers left our joint account in large, clean amounts. $20,000, $35,000, $52,000. One transfer caught my eye. $52,000 to a bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did not recognize the institution. I had never signed authorization for an account there. My pulse slowed in a way that surprised me. Fear was still there, but something older, sharper, slid into place. Pattern recognition. I checked the following month, another transfer, $48,000, different memo line, same destination. Adrian walked past the doorway and saw the papers on the floor. "You should focus on packing," he said. I looked up at him. "What is the account in North Carolina?" He did not break stride. "Business. From our personal account?" He stopped and faced me. "I am not explaining company strategy to you." Company strategy? I almost laughed. I had spent a decade tracing diverted funds and falsified ledgers. I knew the smell of money being moved quietly. I stood up slowly. "You filed your affidavit under oath." He stared at me. "Be careful, Alara." "With what?" "With making accusations you cannot prove." There it was, the line drawn. Lillian came down the stairs with her backpack. "Are we going somewhere?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "We're staying with Aunt Melissa for a few days." Adrian corrected me. "As long as it takes." Lorraine, her mother, sighed as if I was the unreasonable one. "Maybe this will teach you to appreciate what you had." What I had. A house funded by my inheritance with only his name on it. A child with a chronic condition and no insurance. A husband who filed for divorce without warning and gave me 2 days to disappear. I gathered the bank statements and slipped them in my bag with Lillian's inhaler. When we pulled out of the driveway, I did not look back at the house. It was a brick colonial on a quiet street in Franklin. We had planted 2 maple trees in the front yard the year we moved in. I had watched them grow taller than the roofline. I kept my eyes on the road. At a red light, I glanced at the statement again. $52,000 to Charlotte. The memo line read allocation. Another read consulting fee. Consulting for what? I opened my banking app on my phone and checked the balance of my personal account. $18,400. That was what remained of the inheritance after 7 years of life, renovations, and medical bills. 48 hours, he had said. He thought the deadline would make me small. He thought it would make me scramble, cry, beg. Instead, it gave me something else, a starting point. As I drove toward my sister's house with Lillian humming softly in the back seat and the statements resting on the passenger seat beside me, I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. I had spent years investigating strangers. Now I would investigate my husband. Chapter 2. The House with One Name. The next morning, I called Naomi Rivera. Her office was on Main Street in Franklin, in a red brick building that had probably seen a century of divorces and real estate closings. I had passed it 100 times and never imagined I would sit inside it. Naomi was 52, composed, with silver strands in her dark hair and the kind of calm that comes from watching people fall apart for a living. She listened without interrupting while I explained the 48-hour deadline, the canceled insurance, the transfer to North Carolina. When I finished, she folded her hands on her desk. In Tennessee, both parties have a duty of full disclosure. That includes income, accounts, business interests, anything that qualifies as marital property. If he concealed assets in his financial affidavit, that is serious. Serious how? Potential perjury. And it affects equitable distribution. Equitable. I almost smiled at the word. Nothing about the past week had felt equitable. I handed her the bank statements. She scanned the transfers and nodded once. We will file formal discovery. I will also issue a subpoena duces tecum to the bank and to Whitcomb Development Group. If those funds are tied to his business, we will see it. Thomas Ellery represents him, I said. I saw his name on the petition. Naomi's expression shifted slightly. Thomas charges $550 an hour. He is aggressive, but he respects procedure. That works in our favor. In our favor, the phrase steadied me. After leaving her office, I drove to the Williamson County Register of Deeds. The building was bright and impersonal, fluorescent lights humming above rows of counters. I requested a certified copy of the deed to our house. The clerk printed it without comment and slid it across the counter. Adrian Whitcomb. No second name, no joint tenancy, no survivorship language, just him. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the black letters. In 2017, when we closed on the house, I was 7 months pregnant. My blood pressure had been unstable. Adrian told me he would handle the paperwork so I could rest. I remembered sitting in the car outside the closing office, signing a stack of documents on a clipboard while he ran them inside. "You trust me," he had said then, smiling. I had. Back in Naomi's office that afternoon, I handed her the deed and the closing statement I had found in our old files. The closing statement clearly showed a wire transfer of $210,000 from my personal inheritance account. She read it carefully. "This strengthens your position. The source of funds matters, especially if it was separate property prior to marriage or traceable inheritance. But my name is not on the deed. That does not automatically erase your contribution. It complicates things, but it does not erase them." Complicated. That word seemed to follow me everywhere. 2 days later, Naomi called me just as I was helping Lillian with her math homework at my sister Melissa's kitchen table. Adrian filed an emergency motion for temporary custody. The words made my throat close. On what grounds? He alleges you failed to maintain health insurance for Lillian and that your lack of employment creates instability. I felt heat rush to my face. He canceled the policy. Naomi's voice remained level. He claims you were responsible for renewing it and that you neglected to do so. That is a lie. I know. We will respond with documentation. Do you have any written proof that he initiated the cancellation? I thought of the phone call from the pharmacy, the date the denial began. I can request confirmation from the insurer. Do that immediately. We will also submit Lillian's medical records to show your consistent involvement in her care. When I hung up, Melissa looked at me across the table. What now? He's trying to take her. Lillian looked up from her worksheet, eyes wide. Take me where? No one is taking you anywhere, I said, forcing my voice steady. We're just talking to some lawyers. That night, I requested policy cancellation records from the insurance company. The automated system told me a representative would respond within 2 business days. Every hour felt longer than the last. Meanwhile, discovery responses began to trickle in. Bank statements from our joint account confirmed the transfers I had seen. Naomi requested records tied to Whitcomb Development Group. Thomas Ellery responded formally, objecting to what he called overly broad demands. Naomi smiled thinly when she read the objection. That means we are close to something he does not want us to see. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived from the insurance provider. The cancellation request had been submitted online from Adrian's business email address on February 27, 2024. I stared at the timestamp for a long time, 3 days before he told me about cutting costs. Naomi added it to our growing file. As if custody weren't enough, another blow landed from a different direction. Melissa showed me a screenshot from her phone. It was a post in the church community group run by Lorraine. Prayers for families going through hard times. Some women struggle with responsibility and cannot manage what God gives them. No names, but enough detail that anyone in our circle would understand. Comments followed. Stay strong. Children need stable mothers. So sad when priorities shift. I felt exposed, as if my private life had been pinned to a bulletin board. Naomi advised me not to respond publicly. Silence often looks stronger than defense, she said. Focus on court. In early April, she called with another update. We received partial business disclosures. There is a separate entity registered in Delaware in 2021, Whitcomb Urban Holdings Limited. I had never heard the name before. What does it do? According to filings, it's a holding company. No detailed public financials. We will need additional documentation. Why Delaware? Privacy. Many companies incorporate there. It does not mean wrongdoing by itself. But combined with transfers to North Carolina, it means something, I said. It suggests layering. We will trace it. The phrase brought me back to my old office in Nashville, to whiteboards covered with arrows and account numbers. I felt something in me wake up that had been dormant for years. A week later, I was served formally with notice of the temporary custody hearing scheduled for May 14, 2024 at Williamson County Family Court. The document listed allegations in precise legal language: failure to ensure continuity of medical coverage, lack of independent income, emotional instability during marital conflict. Emotional instability. I had not screamed, I had not thrown anything, I had packed boxes and inhalers and bank statements. Still, the words were there in black ink. Naomi met with me to prepare. The judge will look at the best interest of the child, consistency of care, medical involvement, stability of environment. I have handled every doctor appointment since 2018. I know her peak flow numbers by heart. Then we show that. We show records, we show the insurance cancellation originated from him. And the house? The house is part of the broader case. Custody first, then property. I drove past our house once on my way back from the courthouse. The maple trees were just starting to bud. Adrian's SUV was in the driveway. For a moment, I imagined walking up the steps and unlocking the door as if nothing had changed. But my key no longer worked. He had reprogrammed the security code. That night, I sat at Melissa's dining table surrounded by folders: insurance confirmation, medical records from Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, copies of the deed, the closing statement from 2017, bank transfers to Charlotte, incorporation papers for Whitcomb Urban Holdings Limited in Delaware, dated September 2021. 48 hours had been his deadline. May 14th would be mine. I looked at the summons one more time before placing it neatly on top of the stack. The date felt closer than it should. He thought this was about control, about a name on a deed and a narrative in court. But paper leaves trails, and I had just begun to follow them.
Chapter 3. What he was hiding. The first person I called was someone who knew exactly how money tried to disappear. Danielle Brooks answered on the second ring. We had met in a continuing education seminar years ago and kept in touch sporadically. She had built a solid reputation in forensic accounting across Middle Tennessee. "I need you to look at something," I said. "Is this professional or personal?" she asked. "Both." She did not hesitate. "Send it." 2 days later, I sat across from her in a small office in Brentwood, spreadsheets projected onto a wall screen. The transfers I had noticed were no longer isolated numbers. They were patterns. Danielle highlighted a column. These wires to Charlotte start in early 2021 and continue through late 2023. The amounts are consistent with quarterly profit distributions, not random business expenses. "From Whitcomb Development Group?" I said quietly. "Yes. According to the partial bank records Naomi obtained through a subpoena, the originating account is linked to the operating account of his company." My stomach tightened. "How much total?" She adjusted the filter and recalculated. $685,000 over 3 years, possibly more if there are additional accounts we have not seen yet. The number felt heavy in the room. "He reported $180,000 a year," I said. "That does not reconcile." "It does not," she agreed. "This looks like diversion, not necessarily illegal by itself, but if he failed to disclose it during divorce proceedings,
that becomes a problem. A problem, that word again. Naomi later confirmed that she had served a subpoena ducis tecum on Whitcomb Development Group requesting detailed financials for the fourth quarter of 2023. Thomas Ellery responded predictably, objecting to scope and relevance. Naomi called me from her office. They are pushing back, which means there is something there. We will narrow the request, but we will not withdraw it. A week later, Harold Benton requested to speak with Naomi in person. He was the chief financial officer of Whitcomb Development Group, 57, with tired eyes and the look of someone who had been losing sleep. He did not want to meet at his office. We met in Naomi's conference room instead. He kept his hands folded on the table as he spoke. I am not here to take sides. I just want to clarify my role. Clarify what? Naomi asked. There were allocations in late 2023 tied to a redevelopment project in Nashville, approximately $1.3 million in projected investor returns. Some funds were moved into a separate holding structure before year-end. Whitcomb Urban Holdings? I said quietly. He glanced at me, surprised I knew the name. Yes, the internal description was temporary allocation. Temporary for what? He exhaled slowly. I was told it was for strategic positioning before disclosure periods tied to certain reporting obligations. Disclosure periods. Naomi leaned forward. Mr. Benton, were these transfers disclosed to the primary investor? Harold hesitated. Not to my knowledge. The name Marcus Doyle surfaced in my mind. I had seen it in one of the investor reports. After Harold left, Naomi turned to me. If investor funds were diverted without disclosure, that escalates this beyond a marital dispute. Escalates how? Civil liability, potential tax implications, and it strengthens your argument that he knowingly concealed assets. While we built that case, I had to prepare for something more immediate. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for late April at a court-appointed office in Franklin. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. I filled out forms that asked about mood swings, anger, substance use, stability. The evaluator, a woman in her early 60s, spoke in a neutral tone. Your husband alleges instability tied to financial stress and medical management of your child. Can you explain your role in her care? I described every pulmonology visit since 2018, every medication adjustments, the time I slept upright in a hospital chair so I could hear Lillian breathe. Who handled insurance renewals? She asked. Adrian had administrative access. I did not receive cancellation notices until after the pharmacy denial. Did you ever neglect her medication? No, never. She wrote notes carefully. I could not tell whether they helped me or not. 2 days later, life tested me in a way court documents never could. Lillian came home from school wheezing, not dramatic at first, just a tightness that deepened quickly. I checked her peak flow meter. The number was lower than I had seen in months. We're going to the hospital, I said. She nodded, trying to be brave. The emergency room at Williamson Medical Center was bright and unforgiving. Nurses moved efficiently around us. After 2 breathing treatments and a steroid injection, her oxygen level stabilized. I signed paperwork with shaking hands. Insurance information. We do not currently have active coverage, I told the billing clerk. She looked sympathetic. We'll process it as self-pay for now. The final estimate came later by email, $6,800. I opened my banking app in the parking lot before driving home. My personal account showed $18,321. I authorized payment the next morning. When I told Naomi about the ER visit, she did not mask her reaction. That supports your position. A parent who cancels coverage knowing the child has chronic asthma will not look favorable in court. But it costs almost $7,000, I said. I know. That night, as I was sorting through updated bank records, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. This is Alara. There was a pause before a woman's voice responded. My name is Renee Carter. I work at Whitcomb Development Group. My grip tightened. Yes? I would prefer not to meet at the office. Is there somewhere public? We met in a small coffee shop in downtown Franklin. Renee was 61, neatly dressed, composed, but uneasy. I've worked for Adrian 8 years, she began. I handle executive correspondence. Why are you here? She reached into her bag and slid a folded document across the table. I printed this before it was archived. It was an email dated November 2023 from Adrian to Harold Benton. Move the funds temporarily before disclosure. We can reposition after filings are complete. The subject line referenced Whitcomb Urban Holdings. My chest felt tight in a different way now. He knew, I said softly. Renee nodded. I'm not accusing anyone. I just believe transparency matters. Did you provide this to anyone else? No. I looked up at her. Why me? Because I have a daughter too. When I left the coffee shop, the world felt sharper. The pieces that seemed suspicious now formed something structured. Transfers totaling $685,000 moved out of sight between 2021 and 2023. A holding company registered in Delaware in 2021. An email explicitly referencing moving funds before disclosure. An investor potentially unaware of diverted capital. An affidavit filed under oath listing income that did not align with actual flows. I laid everything out on Melissa's dining table that evening. Bank statements, incorporation papers, the email from Renee, the ER bill, the insurance cancellation confirmation. For weeks, I had been reacting to a deadline, to accusations, to fear. Now the narrative shifted. This was no longer about a misunderstanding or a messy divorce. This was about concealment. I calculated the total again to be sure. $685,000 moved out of sight between 2021 and 2023. Not $50,000, not a small oversight. More than $700,000 in structured transfers when projected forward with interest and pending allocations. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. He had believed I would focus on survival, on scrambling for housing, on defending myself as a mother. He had not expected me to remember how to read a ledger. When I opened my eyes, the numbers were still there, patient and unyielding. The case was no longer about whether I could prove a missing transfer. It was about whether I could prove a pattern, and the pattern was larger than even I had anticipated.
Chapter 4. In front of a judge. The courtroom in Williamson County felt colder than it had any right to be in June. Naomi and I arrived early. I wore the same navy dress I had once worn to a professional conference in Nashville, back when my world revolved around spreadsheets and audit trails instead of custody motions and emergency room bills. Adrian sat across the aisle with Thomas Ellery, calm, polished, hands folded as if this were a quarterly review meeting. Judge Amelia Grant entered precisely at 9, 63, steady eyes, voice that carried without effort. When she sat, the room quieted in a way that felt deliberate. Thomas stood first. Your Honor, my client is requesting temporary custody due to concerns about instability in the mother's financial position and recent lapses in medical coverage for the child. He said it cleanly, as if he were describing a neutral set of facts. He referenced the April emergency room visit. He mentioned the $6,800 bill. He emphasized that I had not been employed since 2018. He framed the insurance lapse as a failure on my part. I kept my gaze forward. The father, Thomas continued, has stable income and the ability to provide consistent care. The mother's recent actions demonstrate poor preparation. Poor preparation. Judge Grant looked down at her notes. Mr. Ellery, she said evenly, the court has reviewed documentation regarding the insurance cancellation. We will address that. Naomi rose without hurry. Your Honor, the petitioner's narrative omits essential facts. She handed documents to the clerk.
Exhibit A shows that in 2017, Mrs. Whitcomb transferred $210,000 from her personal inheritance to fund the down payment of the marital residence. Judge Grant examined the closing statement. Naomi continued. Exhibit B is the deed, listing only Mr. Whitcomb as title holder, despite the source of funds being fully traceable to Mrs. Whitcomb. Thomas shifted, but did not interrupt. Naomi moved to the next binder tab. Exhibit C details transfers totaling $685,000 from Whitcomb Development Group between 2021 and 2023 into an account not disclosed in Mr. Whitcomb's sworn financial affidavit. The air in the courtroom changed. Judge Grant looked directly at Adrian. Mr. Whitcomb, were these funds disclosed in your affidavit? Adrian stood. Your Honor, those were business allocations, not personal income. Naomi responded immediately. Regardless of classification, Your Honor, they represent assets under Mr. Whitcomb's control and are relevant to both support calculations and equitable distribution. Thomas objected on relevance grounds. Judge Grant overruled him. Naomi lifted the final page. Exhibit D is an email dated November 2023 from Mr. Whitcomb to his chief financial officer. It states, "Move the funds temporarily before disclosure. We can reposition after filings are complete." The words did not need emphasis. They spoke for themselves. Adrian kept his voice measured. That email refers to strategic capital management. It has nothing to do with concealment. Judge Grant's gaze did not soften. You filed your affidavit under oath, Mr. Whitcomb. If funds were moved in anticipation of disclosure in a way that altered the accuracy of that affidavit, the court takes that seriously. There was a slight pause before she added, very seriously. I felt my hands unclench beneath the table. Naomi then addressed the insurance issue. Your Honor, documentation from the insurer confirms that the cancellation request was submitted from Mr. Whitcomb's business email address on February 27th of this year. Mrs. Whitcomb was not notified until after the pharmacy denied coverage. Thomas rose quickly. My client believed he was adjusting coverage to reduce costs. There was no intent to harm the child. Judge Grant lifted a hand. Intent aside, Your Honor, the minor child has documented severe asthma. A lapse in coverage was inappropriate without coordination. In the second row behind Thomas sat Marcus Doyle. I recognized him from investor summaries in the company records. He had invested $1.2 million into a redevelopment project in Nashville. When Naomi referenced the redevelopment funds and the temporary allocation into Whitcomb Urban Holdings, Marcus shifted forward in his seat. Judge Grant asked directly, is the primary investor aware of the movement of funds into Whitcomb Urban Holdings prior to this proceeding? Adrian hesitated. I handle investor communications, he said. Marcus stood. Your Honor, I was not informed of any diversion of projected returns. The room went still. Thomas attempted to limit third-party commentary, but the moment had already altered the tone. The issue was no longer contained within a marital dispute. Judge Grant reviewed her notes again. The court's primary concern at this stage is the best interest of the child. Based on the documentation presented, including medical records, proof of insurance cancellation origin, and evidence of the mother's consistent involvement in care, the court grants temporary full custody to Mrs. Whitcomb. The words landed slowly, then all at once. Judge Grant continued. Mr. Whitcomb is ordered to reinstate comprehensive health insurance coverage for the minor child within 10 days and provide written proof to this court. She looked down once more. Mr. Whitcomb shall also submit a complete amended financial disclosure within 14 days, including all business entities and associated accounts. Failure to comply may result in sanctions. Thomas nodded, jaw tight. Adrian's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough that I noticed. The gavel sounded lightly. As people stood, I remained seated for a moment, letting the orders settle into something real. Outside the courtroom, Adrian did not look at me. He spoke in low tones with Thomas, urgency replacing the polished calm he had carried in. Naomi touched my arm. "This is temporary, but it matters." I nodded. In the parking lot, I checked my phone. 3 messages from the pharmacy confirming that once the policy was active, they could process the prescription again. 10 days. I thought about the ER bill, the inhaler on Lillian's nightstand, the nights I had counted breaths in the dark. Adrian walked past me toward his car. For the first time since he handed me that folder in the kitchen, he did not look certain. He looked like someone who understood that documents once read aloud in open court do not disappear back into silence.
Chapter 5. He took everything. August arrived without drama. There were no slammed doors, no ultimatums, no raised voices in the kitchen. Just another morning in the Williamson County Courthouse. The same fluorescent lights, the same polished floors, the same bench where Judge Amelia Grant would take her seat. But this time, it was final. Naomi sat beside me, her binder thicker than before. Adrian sat across from us with Thomas Ellery. He looked composed, but the polish had worn thin. The easy confidence he carried in March was gone. What remained was calculation. Judge Grant reviewed the record slowly. The amended disclosures, the bank confirmations from Charlotte, the documentation from Whitcomb Urban Holdings, the email that had started it all. When she spoke, her voice was steady. The court finds that Mr. Whitcomb knowingly failed to disclose material financial information in his sworn affidavit. The evidence demonstrates intentional concealment of marital assets and breach of fiduciary duty. The words were precise, not emotional, not theatrical. Intentional concealment. She continued, "The marital residence is awarded to Mrs. Whitcomb. The down payment is traceable to her separate inheritance, and equity requires correction of title." For a moment, I felt the room tilt. The house, the maple trees, the kitchen where I had once been given 48 hours to disappear. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child is granted to Mrs. Whitcomb. Mr. Whitcomb shall exercise parenting time under a structured schedule approved by the court. My chest tightened, then eased. The marital estate shall be divided 65% to Mrs. Whitcomb and 35% to Mr. Whitcomb, inclusive of funds previously concealed. Thomas stopped writing. Child support shall be calculated based on Mr. Whitcomb's actual average income of $420,000 per year for the period 2021 through 2023. The number echoed quietly in the courtroom. It was not revenge, it was math. Mr. Whitcomb is responsible for all unpaid medical expenses incurred from March 2024 forward and shall maintain comprehensive health insurance coverage for the minor child. The gavel came down once. It was done. Outside, the air was thick with late summer heat. Adrian walked ahead of Thomas this time. He did not look back. His posture was no longer sharp. He looked like a man trying to hold together something already unraveling. Naomi exhaled slowly. This is thorough. He will have a difficult time undoing any of it. I nodded. I expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt something quieter, finality. In September, the next consequence arrived. Marcus Doyle filed a civil complaint against Whitcomb Development Group alleging misrepresentation and diversion of funds tied to the Nashville redevelopment project. The language in the filing mirrored what had surfaced in family court. I read the complaint alone at my kitchen table, now legally mine. The counters were the same marble Adrian had leaned against months earlier, but the room felt different. In October, Danielle called. I heard from a colleague that the IRS issued a formal audit notice tied to the company's 2022 and 2023 filings. Formal? I asked. Formal. Within weeks, local business outlets reported that Whitcomb Development Group was under review.
Adrian announced he would temporarily step aside as chief executive pending internal investigation. No accusations in print, just careful phrasing, financial review, compliance assessment. But the meaning was clear. Lorraine's posts in the church group vanished. No public apology, just silence. A few women from church reached out privately. "We did not know the full story. I'm sorry for what you've been through." I answered some of them, not all. I no longer felt responsible for correcting every narrative. The insurance remained active. I confirmed it personally every month. Lillian's inhaler cost $18 again. $18. The difference between control and security. In January 2025, I stepped back into the field I had left. The forensic consulting firm in Nashville offered me a part-time position. Not a favor, not charity. They needed someone who understood tracing complex transfers through layered entities. On my first day back, as I logged into a workstation and opened a fresh spreadsheet, I felt something return that had been dormant for years. Not anger, competence. My supervisor asked if I was ready to ease back in. I smiled. I have been practicing at home. Lillian's health improved steadily. No emergency visits that winter, no midnight drives to urgent care. Her pulmonologist noted stability in her lung function. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, I ran into Adrian at the grocery store in Franklin. He stood near the produce section, examining apples with the kind of distraction that suggested his mind was elsewhere. He looked thinner, not broken, just worn. Our eyes met. "Ilara," he said. "Adrian." Lillian stood beside me, holding a box of cereal. She gave him a polite nod. He cleared his throat. "I heard she is doing well." "She is." There was nothing left to argue about in that aisle. No schedules to negotiate, no affidavits to contest, no numbers to compare. Just the quiet aftermath of choices. He looked at Lillian. "I'm glad you're breathing easier." She nodded once. We moved on in opposite directions. That evening, I sat on the back steps of the house, watching the maple trees shift in the breeze. The title had been corrected. The mortgage statements now carried my name. The paper had changed. So had everything else. I thought back to March, to the kitchen, to the 48-hour deadline, to the moment I believed I had lost everything because my name was not printed where it should have been. Some people believe possession is defined by ink, that if their name sits alone on a deed, it grants them permanent authority. But courts don't read pride, they read evidence. And when evidence is spoken aloud under oath, paper stops being protection. It becomes truth. If this story has meant something to you, if you have ever felt small because someone tried to rewrite your reality on paper, stay with me. There are more stories about truth, about accountability, and about the quiet way justice works when it's allowed to finish what it starts.